England. Stable Bank and Center State are gold sponsors. Also acknowledge our silver sponsors, Shoemaker Lehman Hendrick, Synovus Bank, Atlas Insurance, and finally our bronze sponsors, Gulfside Bank, Lakewood Ranch Commercial, First Horizon Bank now, and Achieva. So thank you to the sponsors. They provide the value add that allows us to eat when we show up at these places and some of the other things that we do, and allows us to, achieve that mission statement that we had out earlier. Always like to say thank you to the board of directors. There's so much that goes into putting on meetings like this behind the scenes. I think we had 4 lead up meetings to this. William working behind the scenes, all the folks that put in. If you see one of the folks that's on the screen, just say thanks, because they're doing work on your behalf literally daily in order that this organization move forward. So thank you. With that, I'd like to invite up Susan, who will lead the affirmation and the election of our 2022 slate.
Thank you, thank you. So it is that time of year. So last month, the slate was presented and the floor was opened. Now we're going to close that, and I'm going to read the slate of officers that are proposed, and we will take a vote. So the slate of officers are the president, Ben Bacher, president-elect William Wilson, vice president Matt Fensky, treasurer Tom Johnson, past president Joe Hembry, for a 2-year term, nominated for continuing actually are Sarah Lynn Doyle and Neil McCurry. Our 3-year term, and these are new, are Barbara Williams and Ken Swan. And then we have also continuing Harvey Wasserman and Melissa Harris as 1-year terms. So I would like to propose that we vote on this slate. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? So we could say that the slate passed unanimously. Congratulations, past president. Thank you.
All right, thank you everybody for helping us get that cleaned up and move forward. Really excited about next year's slate. Ben's been really active in preparing his agenda for next year. I think it's going to be a good year at CREA. All right, want to point out we've got the CREA Holiday Happy Hour. That's our annual holiday party. Sorry. It's on December 2nd from 5 to 7 p.m. and we just secured Waterside as our location. So we're going to be out at Waterside, out there under the pavilion. Make sure you get that on your calendars and let the folks in your office know. That's a great event to come to. And then we're going to have our installation right here at RASM from 8:30 to 10 o'clock, December 17th. So I want to make sure that everybody's got both of those events on their calendar. Okay, so let me invite both speakers to come on up to the front. I have William, I'm introducing, right? All right, so I have the pleasure of introducing both of these folks to you. We've got Jordan Finkelman, who's the Assistant Vice President of Development with HTG. He's originally from Houston, Texas, and resides currently down in Florida. He's a University of Miami graduate with a Bachelor of Arts in Economics and International Studies. He also graduated from Nova Southeastern University with a master's degree in real estate development. So he works for Housing Trust Group, and his main focus is land acquisition of affordable housing, as well as applying for and gaining tax credits and gap financing so that they can actually produce that. And we're going to hear from them a little bit about what goes into that. Additionally, we have Scott Eller with CASL or CASL. Scott started Renaissance Manor in 1998, which was an assisted living facility specifically with a limited mental health license. He is an advocate for severe and persistent mentally ill individuals with behavioral and co-occurring disorders. So he works with people basically with special needs a lot and tries to find them housing that upholds their dignity as human beings. That he along with Charlie Richards, if you guys remember Charlie Richards, who was a long time politician from our area, founded Community and Affordable Supported Living in 1997, where they started housing folks. They merged that in with Renaissance Manor in 2009. CASL now serves over 700 clients daily with low incomes from Alachua County all the way up to Alachua to Collier counties, and have been awarded over $120 million in federal and state funding to produce workforce and low income and severe and persistently mentally ill individual housing in the last, what, 3 years?
Yes.
3 years. So we've got two experts in what we're focused on today. Welcome, gentlemen, and thank you for your time.
Well, thank you, Joe, for the introduction, and thank you, everybody, for having us here today. Yeah, so my name is Jordan Finkelman with the Housing Trust Group. I'm an Assistant Vice President of Development. Here's a little bit of information about our company. As you can see, we're statewide with our developments. We've completed about 7,000 just in the past, since 1997. Yeah, so we have currently about 1,000 units under construction and 9 developments in underwriting. Our team is about 130 professionals. Yeah, so to discuss the history of affordable housing, the Tax Reform Act of 1986 and the IRS Code Section 42 is where they instituted the low income housing tax credit. And you'll see this provides a dollar for dollar reduction in the tax liability for investors. And yeah, the intent of the program is to get the private sector invested in public-private partnerships. So yeah, you can see that there's about 3 million units of affordable housing since the 80s that have been created, with about 6.7 million low-income families and 90,000 units built each year. You have about 96,000 jobs each year that are supported by this program. Yeah, the default rate is less than 1%. So, as a, looking from the financing point of view, it's very risk averse for lenders.
So basically, banks like us.
Yeah, so you have a minimum 15-year affordability requirement, and often it's actually 50 years, but 15 years is the federal minimum.
So really quick on the 15-year, when you get a tax credit deal, and Jordan's going to explain this further, with between the 9 and 4% credits, but a 9% credit deal, both of them have a borrowing and financing requirement. But also what happens is over a 15-year period, every year the state comes in and monitors your development. And as long as it's in full compliance, they will release the 1/15 of the credits to the tax credit investor. So at year 15, as long as you have 15 years of full compliance, the tax credit investor is completely paid out, at which point the ownership goes from the investor to the developer and or partner, is how that occurs. But typically what happens with Florida Housing Finance Corporation, even though the investor is paid out of 15 years, we have a 50-year serviceability with the development, which means for 50 years, there is a land use restriction agreement on the property, and for 50 years, it has to serve the income strata of people that we stipulated, which Jordan's going to go into further. And also if they have a disabling condition like our developments, that you meet those criteria. So 50 years in one day, you're free to do what you want.
So after 15 years, there's no more.
15 years, there's no mortgage.
Not bad.
So let's consider, what's your dollar amount for affordable housing? Is there a schedule?
In terms of the equity.
Rental, as far as a rental.
Oh, yeah, I have a slide for that we can get to, but generally, it's, I would say much less than the market rate. So, market rate is $2,000 a month, you might be looking at 1,000 or 1,200. I'm just ballparking it here, but
So
we have actual schedule.
So like
Today's market, typical rent used to be 2,200, now it's 4,200. So does your affordable price go up too?
here's an example. It goes up marginally and it typically follows CPI. But what you're going to find, for example, we have a development on Fruitville Road called Arbor Village. Florida Housing allows us to charge $750 a month for the one bedrooms for people at 60% of AMI, which Jordan will go through what that is. Now, if you look at the head FMR for that same unit, it's $975 a month. So we're even below HUD's FMR. And HUD's FMR is between 40 to 60% below market.
It's like Section 8.
We're not guaranteed Section 8 now.
Right, okay. Yes.
What's that from the example?
Oh, fair market rent.
No, what's fair one?
For like a one bedroom, and it goes by zip code, but for 34237, it's $975 for one bedroom.
Yeah, so just to kind of look at some of these affordable housing definitions, you'll hear workforce housing, affordable housing used together a lot of times, and it can be confusing. Affordable housing describes anything that's, looking here, anything under 60%. Generally, workforce housing is like 60% and up. You can really get very complicated into it, into what that means. And workforce housing sometimes involves tax credits, sometimes it does not involve tax credits. Affordable housing always involves tax credits. That's really probably the simplest way to put it. So when you see extremely low income households, that's 30% of the area median income or below, generally. And
So to put that in perspective, area median income for Sarasota County is like $43,000.
60% is roughly 30,000.
So you're talking about people making 30,000 or less to hit the 60% or that low one, it's like $8,000 a year.
So basically what people like Jordan and I do is the people that, clean our hotel rooms, wait our tables, bus our tables, dishwashers and cooks. Your service industry people that have to commute to Palmetto every day and back to work because they can't afford to live here. We make it so they can live here on board, be part of the community.
They can't afford to live in Palmetto.
yeah, so a cost burden is anything over 30% of their income of household income going to housing costs, and severe cost burden is anything over 50%, which there's a lot of them. You'll see just in a second here, Sarasota's breakdown of that. Yeah, but first, workforce housing, there was $16 million made available by Florida Housing Finance Corporation this year for Broward, Miami-Dade, and Monroe counties. Unfortunately, they only had those 3 counties eligible this past year. In previous years, it was statewide. So, that's just something, hopefully they'll include other counties such as Sarasota in that in the future.
I just have to ask why. Yeah, we included.
Yeah, I mean, there was a bunch of comments submitted about it. And I think that, I really can't speculate too much why they would do that other than
They had the
just the need. Yeah, it's probably
Is that a state decision or a federal decision?
state. Yeah, that's a state decision. But you can see that there's different in workforce, in Monroe County, AMI for workforce housing goes up to 120%, with the need being even greater, really greater down there with less land available to develop and difficult development conditions with the ROGOs that they have down there, which is like an ordinance-based zoning that allows you to build multifamily. In Broward and Miami-Dade, within this workforce tax credit funding, you need to have AMIs between 60 to 80%. So that would be the limit there. And generally, the IRS requirement, that always applies. It's the minimum set aside of 40% of your units at 60% AMI. So when you're committing to develop a property, and we'll get into this more, you can commit more than 40% at that level, and you only generate tax credits based on what percentage you set aside at 60% AMI. So most of the time you'll see developers setting aside 100% of units at 60% AMI. You could get market rents in those developments, and I'm looking at it from a developer's perspective. So you'll see that as I speak, but yeah, you'll get more tax credits, and it doesn't make sense financially from putting the deal together and making sure that you can build it and that it's feasible, having market rate units in a lot of cases, because the tax credits are just so valuable. So from a national affordability crisis standpoint, there's nearly 11 million renter households with extremely low incomes. 25% of all renters is a big number, and 9% of all U.S. households. So you can see it's kind of a small pie chart here, but that 72% is extremely cost burden. That's a big number there. Yeah, and just kind of looking here, I wanted to talk about just briefly this infrastructure bill being talked about as or being termed as a reconciliation package, which initially started off at $3.5 trillion. And now it's down in an article that I was reading recently, $1.9 trillion. It's still, and that's according to the White House's latest estimate. It's still in the works, but it's worth mentioning since it's a current event, and approximately $155 billion is estimated to go towards affordable housing. Now that number can change any moment in this presentation or anytime after, but $25 billion is expected to be injected into new construction, rehab, and preservation of affordable housing. $65 billion for the replenishment of public housing funding, which includes rental assistance for hundreds of thousands of families, and $24 billion for housing vouchers and supportive services. Yep.
I know a lot of the things that those funds are going towards are getting added and moved all the time. Are these three items at risk of being removed, or if the package doesn't pass?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, what was the question? I didn't hear what you said.
Oh, I just basically said that there's what's going into this package is being added and removed all the time, and I asked if these three items were at risk of being removed from the package. I think they said that it is.
They're at risk.
Correct.
It's like every year the Sadowski trust funds that come off of your doc stamps from your real estate proceeds are at jeopardy of being swept. And in years past, they've been swept 100% to balance the budget, even though the Sadowski trust funds are to be held in trust for affordable housing. So basically, it's a trust fund raid, but it happens.
I think our Joe, our fearless leader, was last week that 50% is finally promised to go towards that.
Well, what happened is, if you guys recall, and once you guys sign petitions here, every year they sweep a bunch of, right? And they finally came out, and they only got this, that the Sadowski Fund Trust Fund was set up by taxing real estate transactions. Well, there's a lot of realtors, and we have a lot of power and vote and money, because most of you guys put $100 towards your RPAC money, right? Or we have about 60% not opt out rate. So it raises a bunch of funds and political power. And so they did it when we agreed to the tax on title, which is a tax on the service that we provide function and won't necessarily lower the speed because it increases the cost of moving the property, right? So then the realtor said, fine, but only because you're using that tax for something that we think is really, really important, which is workforce housing. So from the genesis, that was the agreement with the politicians in Tallahassee. As they haven't lived up to their end of the bargain over and over again, they kind of came out and were so audacious to say, hey, we're going to put a rule in place that only 50% will we take. And we're like, it was kind of like a smack in the face. And so Florida Realtors finally decided to take action, and they put out a petition, which was going to take 100% and make it a constitutional amendment so it would take away the slush fund of action for them to get pet projects done in Tallahassee. And so the Senate president and a bunch of the leadership up there hopped to, and they basically bartered a deal as we started gathering signatures quickly to have Florida Realtors put that signature drive back in their pocket and promised that they were going to behave better. So we'll see where it ends up.
Never a dumb
It keeps us on our toes.
Yeah. Is this map possibly the reason the 16 million went to Miami?
Could be, you know, red being the deepest, need. But yeah, you can see that the highly populated counties, there's 800,000 low income, cost burden renters in the state total, which is a significant amount. And there's been a lot of steep rent increases since last year with COVID. And yeah, 61% are in highly populated counties. So, and then looking more locally at Sarasota, Sarasota Magazine, states there's 14 new residents per day coming to Sarasota County, on top of the 405,000 currently, approximately. And county officials estimate that there will need to be about 22,000 more homes to support that. Service jobs, and I heard I mentioned this earlier, service jobs are making up the fastest growing sector in Sarasota, and they pay low salaries of around 30,000 a year, which is right where they would need to be to qualify for affordable housing. And according to a 2016 estimate, the most recent data available from Affordable Housing Data Clearinghouse, 42% of all Sarasota County households are dealing with an unaffordable living situation. That's a very significant number. And until recently, new units had slowed. New construction units had slowed since 2007, the housing crash. Approximately 6,200 housing units were built between 2010 and 2017, over almost a decade. And that's about 2.5% of the 234,000 total units available in Sarasota. But in the past, it was like 45,000 units being built every decade. So you're looking at like 10, 15% of the construction in recent years compared to the past, since prior to the housing crash. And then, I threw in this quote here because I think it's really good from the Herald Tribune. Unfortunately, the public often don't want or doesn't want affordable housing units in their neighborhood. They think it's going to attract a different kind of person and bring in crime. People don't understand that today affordable homes and apartments can be quite nice. We need to allow higher densities at appropriate locations downtown along major traffic corridors or in employment centers. And that was a real estate and land use attorney, Bill Merritt of Ikers, Maryland.
Yes.
So we do structural engineering. So I kind of watch since I moved here in 2002, the housing situation, and they would not allow apartments to be built. We're in Manatee County, but they would not allow apartment buildings to be built. I think in either county, there were never these big apartment building complexes going up. Now they're everywhere, and I thought they said that was for affordable housing. We're going to build all these apartment complexes, and now, at least in Manatee County, even in Sarasota, the rents to rent an apartment for the people in the service industry, you can can buy a house even at today's rates for the mortgage cheaper than to rent a 1 or 2 bedroom. It's crazy. So what happened to the apartments? There's so many of them being affordable. I don't know if you guys know what happened there, you know?
We never went that way.
It's the market, and where we are right now is they have capacity for market rate units, actually, but it's still the surplus. But for non-market rate units, which is our world, there is, as of last year, a 1,400 unit deficit in the county. 1,400
Sarasota?
units, yes. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Yeah, in regard to your tax credits, I mean, you know, everybody keeps counting. I have some big developers that go on the country, and it seems like here you can't get it. I had a big surprise when they DeSoto County and they finally did it in 10 years. So, I mean, you know, everybody keeps saying it, but I talked to all the big guys, and they're like, no, we can go to Texas, we can go to Kentucky, we can get tax credits easily. Here, it's like, no way, you're not gonna get it, you just keep fighting the government. So you're not gonna get developers doing it, from what I'm hearing.
Yeah, I would say, and the 9% tax credits, it's extremely competitive. There's really not a whole lot of 9% tax credits to go around each year throughout the state, at least in what's considered a medium-sized county, such as Sarasota and Bradenton. Luckily, we've been pretty successful with it. We have a few developments. I think, the Addison was a 9%, mostly 9% development that we built, Oaks at Lakeside as well, and Riverview 6. So we're kind of like the anomaly, but generally it's very difficult to get 9% tax credits. 4% tax credits are also difficult, but not, I would say, not as challenging. And in fact, you can get the 4% tax credits non-competitive ways. The issue is filling the gap.
I think that's on a slide.
Oh, yeah, we'll get to that. I'm kind of jumping ahead a little bit, but yeah, we'll get to that. But those are just keep in mind in your head right now, those are 2 different types of tax credits.
You skipped right by the NIMBY problem, right? It's gone. But you're calling it workforce housing is a lot easier to take than affordable housing with all the connotations. Right?
Yes, right. And they do overlap in a lot of, as you're saying, they do overlap in a lot of places, not everywhere, but.
You'll get to that. I think.
Yeah.
It's the biggest problem.
For anybody that is taking pictures, we're gonna hang this whole presentation on the website.
Oh, thanks.
Have to, if you don't want to take pictures.
It's hard to read the picture.
Yeah, sorry about that. This is just a cost burden chart. As you can see on the far right pie chart, that's the rental housing affordability in Sarasota with the cost burden is the blue, so 54%. This is a 2015 study. I just really like this graphic. It's a little bit, it's not exactly the same numbers as some of the other demographic information. It's very close. You can see that it just shows it's a major problem. So state solutions, I mentioned Florida Housing Corporation before. 9%, they allocate 9% tax credits. You can get 4% tax credits in them as well. Tax exempt bonds. Counties will issue tax exempt bonds as well. If you're not using Florida housing funding, you may opt to use those tax exempt bonds. We'll kind of get into that a little bit. We're still talking now more macro level. The Florida Housing Coalition is another state housing solution that provides solutions and advice for local groups. Florida HUD offices have kind of like oversee housing discrimination and making sure that everything that it's not becoming an issue. And also they administer housing vouchers to local housing authorities. Local support Sarasota Housing Authority administers housing vouchers for affordable housing properties. The housing vouchers are not just like a guaranteed thing. You can just assume you're going to get them. It's a limited resource. You have to apply, and based on availability, a project may be able to obtain them. And the main value from an affordable housing, workforce housing perspective is that it allows you to finance the development and lever up a permanent loan for the development to be able to make the financial structure work. They also issue, the housing authorities also issue RFPs for county-owned land to private developers. And currently, Sarasota Housing Authority has 3 existing locations for project-based vouchers, which are different. Project-based vouchers are for the entire project. Doesn't matter if tenants leave, the project still has the vouchers, as opposed to tenant-based vouchers like Section 8 vouchers, where tenants take it with them. So just to put that distinction there. And then there's the Sarasota Housing Funding Corporation, a governmental nonprofit as an affiliate of the Housing Authority. And then Bradenton Housing Authority manages and develops public housing and also issues the RFPs for county-owned land to private developers and administers the housing vouchers. Florida housing statistics, there's 8,600 units that were funded through home ownership programs, 17,000 affordable housing units funded last year, 1,400 or so disaster relief units in response to Hurricane Michael. And affordable housing development has contributed $5 billion in economic output to the state of Florida just in 2019. And then 39,000 full and part-time jobs have been created.
What do you mean
Just
by
in the last
affordable
year or
housing
so.
development has contributed in economic output? What is that?
Oh, that's the total value of the development being constructed and all the construction jobs and materials, just all the funding that comes from tax credits, then,
This is what comes out.
Yes,
yeah.
that's your output.
Mhm.
And that doesn't include when you have people in stable and affordable housing, you have a higher success rate of keeping them employed, which is sort of a problem right now, but also reduces other problems. And I'll get to that on my slides.
So just, to kind of look real quickly at misconceptions, this is a lot of times what people think of affordable housing. So there, NIMBYism, I'm getting at it. This is part of the problem, is that this is really the problem. People think that this is what they're getting next to them. And
What
that's
they're
not.
thinking is the misconceptions are the projects.
Right.
What we do are developments.
So here's an example of some of the developments that we've built or are in the process of closing out. And you can see it looks nothing like that. It's really very nice. Oftentimes nicer than market rate quality.
To my knowledge, the only in the last 7 years, multifamily buildings that have been built out of block was the affordable housing development that Scott built on Fruitville.
Really?
Everything else has been state construction. To put it in perspective.
Right. Now getting into the low-income housing tax credit. It's so now we're going to kind of dive into what does that mean and how does it work? It's an indirect federal subsidy given to affordable housing developments. And the syndication of credits and losses become the critical equity component for financing. So when an equity investor buys the credits from us, and as Scott mentioned, it's over a 10-year period of time. So to give you an example, use real numbers. Let's say you have $15 million in credits. Those will be available in tranches of $1.5 million every year for 10 years. And those credits will be purchased usually at a discount. In the past, it was a premium, where if we have $15 million of credits awarded to us, we may sell it for $14 million to Raymond James or Truist or one of these investors here. These are syndicators, which means that they have investors themselves, and they group them up and they'll buy it on behalf of a pool of investors. So they get all those investors will ultimately get the credits. So they'll make a little bit of money, buying it for 14 and getting 15 over 10 years. That's one part of their return. The other part is that they get the losses from the development and depreciation, and there's a lot of losses because you're spending, let's say, $20 million to build this, and the value after you build it is really, let's say, 6 or 7 million, because when you capitalize the NOI, it's a much lower NOI, even though it costs you, it's being subsidized, so it costs you a lot of money to build. So that's part of their return. Yeah, and then the 15-year compliance period that we kind of talked about before is a very serious requirement that you have to meet. After that, you still have to, if you have an affordability period that goes beyond the 15 years, you still have to comply. But the 15-year compliance period is where you have tax credit recapture risk, which means if you rent out a unit, let's say for above the restricted rent you're committing to, you could get slapped with a major tax bill, basically repaying all those tax credits that you sold. And it's just like Armageddon. So, yeah.
So that's the risk of what we're doing. So the beauty is with a 9% or 4% deal credits, those are dollars you don't have to service debt on, because if you had to service that debt, the thing's not going to cash flow. Okay. However, the tax credit investor, the person who buys the credits that you buy back over the 10 or 15-year period, they have to be assured that you know what you're doing. You're going to maintain full compliance, and you're going to also maintain a positive cash flow, which is also a requirement. Because if you don't, and there's a foreclosure, that means they're not going to get the rest of their credits. And so that's the slippery slope to this side of the business. And it's not meant to scare people off. It tells you that there's more complexities to it. But for groups that understand this, like the Housing Trust Group and Blue Sky Communities, they've never had any foreclosures. They've never had a non-compliance.
Mm-hmm.
So basically what you're doing is you're intentionally going into this to lose money.
No.
What? Maybe let me try to put this a different way. If you did not have the tax credits, and you have to build this building to the building code, but make something that's decent, the rents that you're going to charge are not going to be enough to cover the debt load. So even though the building is worth 20 million per se, $20 million, you have 15 million in credits. You're going to have, $3 million in sale money, and possibly SHIP or CDBG or home some other sources of dollars into it. Let it borrow some money as well. Okay. So let's say, you have to borrow, a couple $1 million on it, $1 million. Well, if you have, for example, an 80-unit building generating $840,000 a year in income, after your expenses, you can pay the debt burden. But if you have to pay the debt burden of $20 million, it's not going to cash flow. However, for what's called GAAP, generally accepted accounting principles, you have to capitalize your entire asset of the 20 million. So on paper, it's losing money because this is the valuation, but your debt burden is here. So you have to book what the development cost. However, if you were to look at it from a tax appraiser standpoint of the highest and best use, it'll be worth the $20 million or $18 million. But if you look at what we're able to charge, the building's worth at best a third of it, would you say?
Approximately.
Yes.
So a major corporation, instead of paying taxes, pays into the tax fund, that then subsidizes the delivery of the units to either 80% or 40% of today's cost, which then enables the developer to produce units and lease them at under market rates over the time period that they need.
So you have, for example, the people that bought our credits for the Orlando and Lakeland deals that we have, CVS Aetna bought our credits, and I'll get into that on my slide presentation a little bit. So they buy the credits for the credits worth $15 million. They buy them for $14 million, but they get the tax benefit of the $15 million. So they just saved $1 million. However, they're buying those credits up front on day one. It takes us 10 years or 15 years to give them all the credits back. But in the meantime, since they're the 99% owner, they can write off all that depreciation over those 10 years or 15 years. So they get a huge tax benefit to this deal. So I guess some round numbers, they're probably on a $15 million tax credit deal. They're probably going to enjoy probably around $3.5 to $4 million in difference. So you owe $15 million, but it's going to cost you $11 million.
Yes.
In order to win those of the 9% credits that you got there, and I mean, I've heard it called a lottery, like a 10 or 11% actual success rate. You, Scott, I think you have that special community that we heard about, and that has a little different bucket to come from. Is that a fair statement?
No, it's the same 9% credits, but there's a separate application round for what's called homestead eligible condition. Then you have your standard credits that could be for seniors or for families. Yes.
So there is a little bit,
It's a set aside. It's in the same pot, but it's like it's your house, you know, you have your house budget at $80,000 a year, which you're going to take $5,000 out of the pot, put into your vacation fund. It's a sort of set aside of the same pot.
But so it is a little easier than the standard, whatever percentages are out there.
I guess you could say that. Huh? There's difficulties to it.
Oh, sure. Okay.
Because we have to guarantee services for 50 years. We'll get into that. Go ahead.
Yeah, let me just say also, I'm not an accountant, I don't think Scott is. But just with depreciation, you know, that's just one of the things that helps a lot with getting investors the yield that they need. To go back to your point about the lottery, more or less, generally, every time you apply for credits, more or less, not in every situation, but I would say 95% of the time it ends in the lottery. But that's not the only factor. There's, you know, believe it or not, there's more important factors that come before that in most cases, which may be meeting a goal of the state, which may be getting a local government contribution, which is getting a municipality to basically give you a match or a commitment for generally $300,000 to $500,000 to show that there's local support. Another goal might be being near a Sunrail station, or being in a local government or an area of opportunity, which is a map that Florida Housing publishes, and if your property happens to be within that area, you qualify. So you go through those goals first, and then after that, then comes the lottery if there's multiple eligible applicants.
Who are traditionally buyers, what size of parcels are they looking for?
Usually, so there are direct investors, but usually we work with syndicators. So I'll just kind of go back a few slides here, or one slide. In the red circles, these are some of the typical investors that we work with. Not all of them, we work with other investors as well. But Raymond James does quite a bit of our business. In CREA, we had worked with in numerous developments. Yeah, these are just a few.
What exactly are you able to do?
If you think about how much taxes you have to owe to be able to use these tax credits, it's a lot. You know, I mean, to be paying let's say in that case of 15 million, pay $1.5 million in taxes that you would owe, not taxable income taxes due per year. So, yeah, that's why we end up working with syndicators. So now this is the gap. This is
Hey, George and Scott, you know, I love your presentation, but this seems like it's a closed fraternity. Only the big boys can play in this game. You know, I'm a small developer builder. I can't get in this game.
Well, so the RFAs that we've kind of been talking about are generally for big, larger projects, larger developments, I should say. There are other RFAs out there. Florida Housing puts out I think 12, 13 RFAs a year. And some of those are for smaller permanent housing. And in fact, if you go to the Florida Housing website, I'm just going to go back a few slides here. This page here, and which is floridahousing.org. And then you go to the bottom blue box, there's a link for RFAs. And then you can see all the different RFAs, and they have smaller permanent housing. I would say it's actually less competitive than the RFAs that we've been talking about.
Is it
Generally.
RFA and RFP?
So RFA is request for applications,
Okay.
and RFP
Same.
for proposals.
But in your question, when I get to my part of the presentation, I'll explain, because the history of CASL will help you understand your dilemma.
Okay, all right, and just the relevance, just there are a number of parcels in our communities that have sold for these kind of things. Clearly what Joe's talking about on Fruitville Road, that sold, I believe, I sold one in Palmetto that became part of the tax credit deal.
Yes.
And I believe there's some other around town, so I think the opportunity might not be for every developer, because clearly you don't want to get into it and then stop where you've got bigger problems. But
Well,
there
well,
are opportunities for us.
But
to
there's
sell.
nuances to it. He's correct on some things, but I'm going to have Jordan continue, then we can help. I think when we get through it, I'll shed some light on it.
Okay. Yeah, so this is the gap. This is like the most important slide in my presentation, I believe. And that's this just shows what makes up a tax credit development. Think of the box. There's two boxes, one at the top and the bottom. Think of one box as the entire financial structure of a tax credit development. All the money that it takes to build one. And once you have that, you're good to go. So with a 9% tax credit deal, 80% of the structure is tax credit equity and 20% is debt. So to make numbers easy, let's say $20 million is the total cost of the development. You'll have $4 million in debt and 16 million in tax credits. Tax credit equity, I should say, which means you really need to have 17 or 18 million in tax credits to get to the 16 million in equity, because you're selling it for a discount. So I think we talked about the 10-year period of time. Tax credits, the 9% tax rates are extremely competitive, and they're also usually the most profitable. The feasibility is just much better, and a lot of times they're easier to make those deals work. So we like them. 4% tax credits are also another way of financing developments. And so the 40% equity is as of right. In this case, it's not competitive. So you can just go and you ask for it and you can get it, the 40% tax credit equity. 25% debt, generally you'll be able to qualify with any bank, generally. Not any bank, but banks that will lend on affordable housing. So then the gap in the middle, the 35% gap, is the part that keeps these deals from being done, and that is getting a gap loan from the state or from a county or city, whoever may provide that, and generally that's anywhere from $5 to $8 million, depending on the deal. Sometimes it could be less. If you have project-based vouchers, then you can afford to have a smaller gap loan or gap financing. So looking at these here, a few different sources. Some of these come from Sadowski, sale, the sale funding, and got a surtax, EOI home, CDBG, SHIP, and sale are the main sources that come from the Sadowski Trust Fund, which is worth mentioning.
So when they cut those funds, it makes 4% deals more difficult to do on the financing end of it.
Because your gap has to come from the county.
Well, even with your gap financing that he just mentioned, that the payment terms are significantly less than traditional financing. And again, that's the challenge, I think, that the nice young lady here talked about, is if you have to do traditional financing on these deals, they do not work. That's where you're charging $1,800 a month for one bed. It's not going to work for our people.
Right, so the sale loan is the Florida Housing, the state gap that they provide. They charge 1% interest only. So if it's take a $6 million loan, you'll pay 1% interest on that. So $60,000 a year.
What's the
And
percentage? Is it 20?
No amortizations. And it's subordinate. So if you don't have enough cash flow to support it, then you don't even have to pay it. It does accrue. So at the end of the 15 years, you still owe it, and it's like a negatively amortizing loan. So you could end up, if you had a really difficult deal, you could end up having $1 million, almost $1 million of negative amortization over 15 years. But the deal, would still potentially work. And in that case, you may have another way of paying that off, perhaps with amortization of the permanent loan that you do have that goes in conjunction with that. So now we're kind of moving into site selection, what it takes, probably the more interesting part for realtors, and just looking at what does it take to find a site that actually will be developable for affordable housing. And some of the main factors are proximity scoring, which is how close you are to amenities such as grocery stores, schools, pharmacies, bus stops, or bus stations, jobs. And then meeting RFA goals is another thing that's important. So is the site located within an area that is in an area of opportunity, or that is in a priority area? It could be just something that the county wants to support, or the city wants to support. So they give you a financial commitment, which is a form that they sign, a affordable housing form, that says we commit $460,000 to this development should it pull through the funding. And if you don't get the funding from the state, then that form is just deobligated. But you need that form when you submit your application to the state, and that gives you a major edge in winning through that RFA goal. That's just one type of RFA goal. There's several others, but that's kind of like the main one that most developments are funded through. Basis boost, that's being located in either a qualified census tract or a small area, difficult to develop area. Both of those are set by HUD. So if you do a quick search on the HUD website or on Google HUD QCT map, you can pull that up and see if the site's in a QCT or DDA. And then the existing zoning is important. The site needs to be zoned for multifamily for however many units the development requires. If it's not, then you won't be able to develop on it. Florida is a state that does require zoning in place before you submit. Proximity scoring, this is just a little breakdown. So when you're submitting an application, you have to decide, and when you're running a pro forma, deciding, is it going to be an elderly development or a family development? Sometimes this is NIMBYism, kind of like geared just, hey, is the community going to be supportive of this development? Because while you generally don't require the support to be able to build it, it does help when you're going through the site planning process and getting any approvals you need, any variances if necessary. The county type depends if it's in a small county, a medium or large size county. Generally, Miami-Dade, Broward, Palm Beach, Pinellas, Duval, and Hillsborough, and Orange are all large counties. Medium counties are pretty much, say probably 30 counties throughout the state. Sarasota and Manatee Counties are both medium-sized counties, which there's a decent amount of funding available for it. We'd like it to be more. Small-sized counties get very little funding. And it's mainly population-based, but small counties are generally funded in the RFAs that we participate in, probably 2 deals a year throughout the whole state. So,
and the other challenge with the small counties is you typically have lower rent limits, which makes them more difficult to cash flow for the developer, which makes the deal harder to sell for housing and credit underwriting.
And the boost that you have here for this little table here with the 5 little buckets, you can get scoring boosts from being located in one of those areas. QCT and DDA we discussed. LDA is a limited development area, which Florida Housing has kind of been moving away from. PHA and RD. RD is rural developments, and PHA being a public housing authority. So that definitely helps. Once you get to a certain proximity level, it doesn't really matter so much what you are. You just kind of have to hit the minimum. Currently, in the past, Florida Housing tried to put different tiers in that would make you more competitive the better you scored. But at some point, they realized it doesn't really matter if there's an extra pharmacy near you, as long as you have a lot of amenities, that's fine. Services, these are just bus stops and public transportation services. And then we discussed the community services. So yeah, the minimum is the large counties are 12.5 points currently, and medium-sized counties are 9 points. Yeah.
Hi, are current land costs a challenge to make you feel it work?
Um,
Because I heard that.
Oh, well,
It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's emotional.
Yeah.
Um,
Multi-family, I heard that it's up like 60,000 units of thing for land right now. So-
Yeah,
Yeah,
I would
we
say,
can't swing that.
yeah, I would say land costs have soared in the past year, and it's been very challenging.
Do you have a threshold or what do you pay?
Well, we look at it mostly per unit. I mean, typically in the past, we've been looking at $8,000 to $12,000 per unit. It's generally like our preferred range, but there's cases where we're having to pay much higher than that. And it does become a real problem when we go through credit underwriting and we have to have an appraisal done. And if the land is not appraised, then the developer is responsible for any overage. So, sometimes that can be a major impediment to the financing.
Pretty common language now.
Yeah. Yeah, so looking at the land contracts, sometimes we usually can compete with market rate buyers on price. It's become a little bit more difficult. The more challenging part is the timeline. So having plenty of time to close and time to get through an investigation period so we can submit the application and see what the application scores. Generally, the timeline is we submit in October, November, and within about, I would say, a week to 2 weeks, the state releases a scoring sheet that tells you how well you score. You have to manually go through it and sort it yourself. And then you can see where you rank. It's not the final decision though, as even if you do it correctly, certain applications may not be eligible, and that could change the whole thing. So typically within about 2 to 3 months, the state staff will go through and score everything. And I believe that's in December of this year, so next month, for the 2021 applications. And they'll go through and they'll tell everyone what applications are eligible or not, and they'll give their recommendation. So, and then going back to the contracts, had a little tangent, but we offer seller's option a lot of times. This is becoming more common in affordable housing. So for affordable housing, with the seller's option, we allow market rate developers to submit offers to sellers while we're tying up the site. And if we get funded on our financing rate, if not, then we don't tie the seller's hands a lot of times. So that's just something Housing Trust Group has done. Go to the next slide. Income averaging is just, real quick, a way to allow higher income levels than the 60% affordable housing residents qualify to allow them to. So you still have to average everybody at 60% or less in the development, but you can go up to 80% AMI. I think skip through that. Kind of just went through this allocation process. The total timeline is for the development is 24 to 40 months.
That's an important thing for the realtors in the room that want to try to put something together on this. The 2 affordable deals I've done have averaged about 1,000 days. So just,
Joe had a lot more hair before he met me, but he's a great champion.
Tax credit pay-in, so of the $15 million number, as an example, we get 15% when we close the development, close on the land and start construction. 50% generally at construction completion. It could be a little less than that, and 100% by the time we pay off the construction loan and convert to permanent financing, which is like 6 to 9 months after completion generally. With rates being so low right now, we generally push back the equity as far as we can, because it's cheaper to borrow at today's rates for longer with construction loan proceeds rather than have equity come in sooner into the deal. So if that makes sense, you get a higher tax credit price, which might be 94 cents or 95 cents per tax credit, and that goes back to the discount that we talked about with, let's say, getting 14 million for $15 million, 14 million of equity for $15 million in credits. The approval process, I think I kind of had talked about this with the report coming out in the lottery, and then being able to sort it yourself, and then the review committee coming out. There is a litigation process, which takes 2 to 4 months generally, where developers will fight amongst themselves, and everybody wants to win a deal, so everybody's going at each other. And then the final board approval is when the Department of Administrative Hearings judge makes a final order based on their recommendation. And after that, then the applicant takes that recommendation to the Florida Housing Board, which could then agree or disagree with the judge, and the Florida Housing Board, makes the final decision. So generally, they take the recommendation, but not always. So this is a HUD rent chart here that tells you how much rent to be charged and what the income levels are for each AMI. So it's a really good chart. This is for Sarasota County, and actually it includes the Bradenton MSA as well. Incomes range from 20 to 80% for affordable workforce housing with credits, and average 60% AMI. This is a typical ownership structure for development. 99.99% is owned by a limited partner. That's a tax credit investor. And as the developer, they'll typically own 0.01% of the development. And as far as the set aside commitments, this is like the federal set aside commitments, which you can select any one of these 3 bullet points here. Generally, you wouldn't want to do a 20% at 50% AMI because it just makes it more difficult to finance the development. You would either do 40% at 60% AMI and just do 100% of the units being at that level, or average income test, which basically does averages to 60%, but you can go up to 80% units. And then the state has their own set of requirements on top of the federal requirements, which require, this is the same kind of thing as I was saying, and also you have 10% of the units that have to be extremely low income, and the extremely low income level is 30% in Sarasota and 30% in Manatee, but it ranges from around 25%, I believe, to 40%. So it just depends which county you're in. The state will tell you what level they want that county to be at, what's required. So if you don't use the income averaging, then it's 10%. If you do income averaging, then it's 15% that have to be at this lower level of affordable housing. Here's an example of a set aside chart that we'll fill out for an application. This one is actually for the Addison that we completed in Bradenton, where 10% of the units are at or below 35%. At the time, it was a different level, a different EOI level in Bradenton, and 75% at 60%. Joe?
I just want to make sure that Scott gets a chance to go over some of the stuff he's got.
Yeah. Almost there.
We're running along.
Okay. All
I
right.
know you got so
I'll
much
speak to
back
it,
then.
I'll
It's
speak
a
to it.
complicated subject.
As long as you send this out.
And 15% of it is market rate units. So we don't get tax credits on those units. We only get 85%. So that deal. So you can kind of take a look at this if you grab the presentation, but this shows a 9% deal on the left and a 4% deal on the right, and how the numbers work. And we have a slide here for a few slides for the Addison, which you are probably familiar with. If not, it's in Bradenton, and fantastic development. My coworker James Zoneman developed. And here's the budget here. This is a project setup with the unit mix, operating expenses. This is a 15-year pro forma that we run.
So Jordan, you do these charts.
Oh yeah, all day, all day, every day. Yeah, sources and uses, equity calculation, debt sizing. And, that's it. Let's switch here. Sure.
All right, as Joe said, my name is Scott. I'm founder and CEO of CASL. I'm going to go through as quickly as I can. Thank God I looked at his presentation before I came here today, because mine was very similar to his. I would put you all to sleep. So we started, as Joe said, in 1998. And as the gentleman in the back said, we started as a small developer. I had a 30-bed ALF. That's how I started. We basically have grown since then, as we're going to talk about, but we have 4 types of services. We have the neighborhood housing. We have one called Independence Place that we developed a new model for people with developmental disabilities. Then we have our partnership with Blue Sky Communities in Tampa and the CASL partnership, which we're going to explain a little bit. And then where it all began, which was Renaissance Manor, which is our ALF, which is now a 56 resident campus. Our mission is to provide clean, safe, and affordable housing for people with disabling condition or conditions. Okay, and that's your toughest demographic to deal with, but also you're challenged in the income levels as well. In 2017, I met Sean Wilson, the founder and president of Blue Sky Communities. And what got to this point really quick, so we started in 1998. We incorporated January 1st, 1999. I had a penny in the bank, a $29,000 accounts receivable, and a payroll to meet in 2 weeks. So back in those days, I literally was the chief cook and bottle washer. And what I knew then is that I had to grow this thing in order to get to a certain tipping point. And that is where you can play with the big guys. So we started with a 30-bed facility, then about a couple of quadplexes. And then I started buying single family homes. And this will give you this map here. You have to zoom in on it, but that shows us on the west coast of Florida where we are. And you'll see us sort of condensed housing in different areas. There's actually over 100 properties that we have, but how we grew is we originally were working with SHIP funding, cash, home and CDBG funds. And we were buying, 1, 2, 3, 5, 10 single family homes at a, time, and then converting them into housing for people with special needs and what's called a scattered site permanent supportive housing model. Yes, sir.
Scott, do you need a license for those 3 to 5 homes?
No, because we are not providing the level of service that crosses the threshold for licensure as an assisted living facility. I have one ALF, that's all I want for now, because the regulation has become very burdensome, which has driven up cost. So the reality in my world is the permanent supportive housing works very well. I have developed other assisted living units in the past and have entertained doing that through Florida Housing because there are tricks to it versus the conventional garden style apartments that the Housing Trust Group and Blue Castle developed.
So the neighbors complain that you have a 3 to 5 people in a single family home?
We've come across NIMBY issues before. Those can be very expensive and painful. But what we've learned is the longer you're there and they get an idea of what's going on, they're very comfortable with it. And you're going to find, in many cases, I remember one of our biggest persons, our biggest opponents to development I did in Sarasota County. It was interesting, back in 2004, we opened Arbor Village. She was the second person in advocating for her friend to live there. Okay.
The federal housing law also prohibits discrimination based off of of that, so they don't actually have to notify anybody. But if they buy a home and they're next door to you for the purposes of what they're doing, as long as they're not breaking occupancy code, there's no difference.
Your protection is if I'm disrupting your peaceful enjoyment or your safety, I have the problem. If I'm not, and the person says, well, I don't want that person there because I don't want, pardon me, people that are black, people that are disabled, whatever it is. If you say, I don't want them there for this reason, that's the problem,
So
okay?
you own these homes, you got 3 to 5 people in there. Any supervision with these, mentally?
Yes, so we have roughly 40 case managers. Each case manager manages between 15 to 20 people. We give them a vehicle, cell phone, laptop, computer, and they're on the road. We have an electronic health record system, so they can access records on the road as they take people to doctors. So we're going to get to that here in a second. So this is sort of our makeup right now, as you can see, between our ALF, our community housing, and then we also have community affordable support living, which is a subsidiary corporation where we house people with developmental disabilities. Now, in those housing units, we work with over 30 different providers to do care coordination, coaching, and what's called in-home support. And then the people in the house with their Medicaid waiver hires those people directly, so we don't have any tie to it. We do monitor it to make sure there's no exploitation, abuse, or neglect. But besides that, the care is hired through those individuals.
You guarantee rent from these 3 to 5 people per house?
No, you have to sign a contract with them and collect the rent like anywhere else. So right now, the slide's actually inaccurate. We're serving 700 people plus per day because we just opened Cypress Village in Fort Myers. And by the end of 2022, we're going to be over 1,000 bed capacity in Florida. Right now, we're serving 7 counties. We're going to be in 9 counties operating by the end of 22. And by the end of 23, we're going to be in 10 counties in Florida.
So in the majority of your homes, 3 to 5 homes, or you have big 60 unit places or 30 unit places?
So of my makeup, we have like a 90 or 100 houses, I lost count, that are, 3, 4 people, maybe 5 in the house at most, typically around 4 is the max number. Then I have duplexes, triplexes, quadplexes. I own condos and condo developments. I have my assisted living unit that people that need more supervision and care with a limited mental health license. And then we now have the guard style apartment buildings. And at those units, we have the people in the buildings themselves. So we have allocated, okay?
We got 4 minutes.
So this is Arbor Village in Sarasota. So this one is an 80 unit apartment building. We have 8 units at 22% of AMI because we have that National Housing Trust Fund money that Obama set up before he left office. So those are people at 22% of area median income, which means they're around $11,000 a year or less. Then we have 8 units of people at 33% of area median income, which is around $17,000 a year. The remaining 64 units are people that are at 60% of AMI, or roughly $30,000 a year. Okay. Now, we opened during the pandemic on March 18th to 20. So it was very challenging to get everybody in, but by April 30th, we moved in roughly 100 people. And on this unit, what we did is we worked with a housing authority on getting vouchers. So because we went way beyond our threshold of the people that were actually at the income level. So we have far more people than required at 33% of AMI and 22%. But the way we mitigated it is we got the housing voucher in place, because otherwise they would not get through income certification and credit underwriting, or through credit to get the unit, because you can't have more than 30% of income towards rent. So we have 71 of the 100 people there are people that were on the streets at one point in time and had disabling conditions. People that were in downtown Sarasota that nobody wants to look at or admit that's there. Okay. 1 year later, 92% of the people that moved in are still there. 92%. As a matter of fact, if you go down to restaurants downtown, and I do all the time, hey Scott, how you doing? They know who I am. They thank me. I ask them not to because I like to keep things confidential. But these are people bussing your tables, sitting you down in restaurants, ordering your food for you. Okay, they're the ones that are cleaning the hotel rooms, and so we rehabilitate people. So that's where it is. So this is Arbor Village, right down in Fruitville and right by Tuttle. So the impact we have, I'm going as quickly as I can now. We talked about the 92%. I've been doing this for 22 years. Here's the kicker that addresses the concern you had. 95% of the people that we put in housing remain in housing or go to other housing and remain stable. 5% need to go back to the the emergency rooms, your crisis units, your detox. Okay, our averages are lower than the averages in the neighborhoods you live in, believe it or not. The reason is in our units, what CASL does in the partnership with Blue Sky is we wrap in social infrastructure into our units, which means when you move in, you have a case manager offer to you. We do transportation, we'll get you food, whatever it is. It's a power sharing type of arrangement. We work together for your success. Now, a neat statistic is for everybody we have in housing that has a disabling condition, the average is there's a $21,000 per year savings to the acute care forensic system and the judicial system. So that means currently CASL is saving our community $10,290,000 annually in savings on those costs. So, for example, Arbor Village, within 15 years, not only will pay for itself with the credits, but the savings in the acute care system, it will also save our community that much money. So this is Cypress Village in Fort Myers. We opened it on November 1st of this year, 95 units. As of right now, we're at 60+% capacity. There are 70 one-bedroom and 25 two-bedroom units. We have that many available, and we have 300 applicants in a 2-week application cycle. So something to mention is the challenge is we are capped at what we can pay per unit. Like, for example, you said $8,000 to $10,000 per unit. We sometimes have to go higher. When you go higher, that reduces the amount of money you can invest into the unit, which make the deals impossible. So for your higher end developers that can pay more per lane cost per door, it is difficult to compete. So the challenge is we have to find that needle in the haystack, which it is a lot of times, because they have to, in our world, it's location, location, location. You got to build these developments in areas where you have all these community amenities where people want to be. To give you an example, if I build this out east of 75, I could buy land cheap. But guess what? It's not going to fill up because the people that we're serving are still going to want to be down here. And you'd rather go sleep at the Salvation Army in a cot for $12 a night versus live out there and bus in. And that's the challenge. And this is a little bit of history of Blue Castle. So as we talked about earlier, I met Sean Wilson in 2017, and we saw that there was a synergy between the two of us. In 2018, we did an application. We were awarded. And since then, we've done 5 more applications around the state, and we won those. So with our partnership with Blue Sky, we're currently working on a 370 unit development and 102 unit development in town as well. That's going to be more of workforce housing versus the populations that CASL is currently serving. But in our housing, where we got workforce families, what CASL is going to do is make sure that if there are any extenuating circumstances, we're going to link them to the agencies or within ourselves to help them. But when they have kids involved, when the kids get the school buses, they come to the clubhouse, we got to make sure we're going to have a classroom. We're going to look at what their assignments are, help them get their homework done. So even with kids with working mothers, we're going to get their grade point averages up, their test scores up, and also their graduation rates up. So these are all things that we're doing. So this is a quote by CVS Health, who bought our credits in Orlando. We are focused on cultivating the right relationships with community organizations across the country and combining strategic investments in housing services to address the specific needs of communities. The reason why CVS has gotten so aggressive on buying Aetna on the credits that CASL Blue Sky are doing is because they know when they get clients in those buildings, because of the work that we do, we're going to reduce their costs. Because in the Medicaid world, the feds say to Aetna, we're going to give you X number of dollars to serve X number of people. If it costs less than that, that's your problem. If it costs more than that, then you figure it out. So it's up to the insurance companies to say, well, how can we find a way to provide the care needed for people, but yet have retainage? And so they're realizing that when they support developments like CASL Blue Sky are doing, their healthcare costs are going to go down, which means their profitability goes up. So it's behoove them is, for example, they have invested 93,000 rental units they've invested in, well over $1 billion. Because again, they realize the cost benefit. So you go from somebody that's costing you 50,000 a year down to 25 for 20. Well, there you go. So it's a match made in heaven. We're also working with the sheriff's department. Because I'll give you an example. We have a guy that's got a master's degree up in New York State. And he worked for the Division of Forestry. He disappeared years ago. They couldn't find him. And what other cities have done when you get down to Florida is when they found him, he got arrested, they would buy a bus ticket to the next county. He went from Jacksonville to Miami, Miami to Collier, Collier to Sarasota. The local people bought a bus ticket just to get out of our county, kick the can down the road. He was here living on the streets. If you know, a lot of people downtown knew him. 32 arrests in 1 year, 16 admissions to the crisis stabilization unit. That was in 2015. We're now 2021. He's been living with me since. He's now working from in 15. He moved in from 15 to 21. 0 arrests, 0 admissions to crisis units, 100% compliance with his medication, and going to his doctors because we go with him and we make sure to get the services he needs. Think of the savings on the system. When you're arrested and arraigned, just that 3-day period is $3,000. So what happened is back in the day, Tom Knight heard about the model that we had. He goes, we want to do more of this. So we started a couple of projects with the sheriff's department. One's called Shifts. We took in 111 people that combined had 667 arrests, 875 charges. We reduced it to 3 arrests and 0 new charges. Again, savings to the taxpayer, and over 75% of those people we got employed, work in the community. And so it would reduce the arrest rates. So we now work with Sheriff Hoffman on a development as well. So that's what we're doing. Looks like time. So this is Swan Lake Village in Lakeland, Florida that we're doing. That's on a 19.5 acre site, 84 units in phase 1, 96 units in phase 2. And this is Fairlawn Village in Orlando, Florida, where we have 3 buildings that we're building in phase 1. And that's going to be like a 5-phase deal. This is Alto Towers that we're building in Miami with 100 units in downtown Miami. And also Jack Miranda Place that we're building in Fort Charlotte with 106 units. And this is what we're looking for, North Trail New Trail Plaza. That'll be 101 units, which will be workforce, where we're going to have the after school programs for the kids. Thank you.
Guys, put your hands together, please, gentlemen. Thank you so much for sharing about what you're doing to help build and solve the need for both workforce and low-income housing in Florida. I think it's exciting to see what companies like this are doing. If you have a piece of property that you can't find the right solution for, sometimes it's worth giving one of these 2 gentlemen a call and saying, hey, is there a way to work this into the system you have? That some of the deals that I've done on workforce housing, really, they were in the right spot, but maybe they were just they were in the shade of something else, or for whatever reason, they didn't work. And often workforce housing can be something where you can repurpose a piece of land that otherwise hasn't worked out for things, but is otherwise well located. So I want to encourage you as realtors to go back through the presentation that they put together today. There was a wealth of information in there. And also just go forth being advocates for what these guys are doing and applying the dollars that politicians are promising to these things and actually having them deliver on it rather than raid them for pet projects. So thanks again. Sorry we went a little bit over with your time today, but I felt like it was worth it, and I was really appreciative to you, both of you, for your time and efforts in informing us. Thanks, guys. Have a great day, everybody.
Yes, sir.
Scott, you got a card?
Yes, sir. What I said before is we got our corporation to thank you. I had to squeeze it in there, but we
Huh?
Oh, yes.
Jordan, you got a card?
Yes.
Thank you.
So we started buying single family homes, and we got a model down that works. And then we were able to get our portfolio to a certain size on a balance sheet to where on bigger deals, we can get them bought. I mean, on these bigger deals, they want to see a certain amount of financial stability and
These bigger
size.
deals, you can take multi-million-dollar properties. When you look at them.
And
What Arbor?
one of our team members.
That was with the office building. That was close to $22 million.
So you got financing in that?
Yeah.
So who else is with you?
Blue Sky Communities is my partner.
So, I had a 142 bed ALF back in the 80s.
Yeah.
Okay. And it just, the big boys sort of made it tough on me. They made workman's comp go crazy. They made liability insurance go crazy.
I've grown my company, and my wife has stopped me.
I love seeing
And I tell you what, before we broke ground in Arbor Village, 2 weeks before we broke ground, I was completely out of corporate long-term debt, not personal, but corporate debt. I was out of it.
Yes.
And so all of a sudden, we break ground in Arbor Village, we get the construction loan, see me and my partner on the hook for $10.25 million.
As I did.
Then once the construction loan, we got the CO and the investor stepped in, we now owe this investor $15 million. And my wife's like, well, so much for being out of debt. I'm like, but I said to my wife, and I would argue with my CFO, guys, you can't look and count the beans in the bank account. I got to look 1 year out, 5 years out, 10 years out, 20 years out, simultaneously all the time rapid fire. And because if I don't grow with these new, bullshit regulations coming up, you can't stay in biz. So we got to cap our admin budget at 11%. Okay? You go over and your organization is going to topple over and fall. So I had to keep it below that. And what I've done is grow the revenue in the organization. You have to grow. But we went from we're 800 right now. We're going to be roughly 1,100 or 1,200 by 2023.
Hats off to you because I just got out of the way. I see I was one person. You have a team. I started in 19.
No, I got 70 staff.
So
I had 1984.
only on affordable housing now,
ALF days back, used to be called an ACLF.
I know. I don't congregate. Oh, no, trust me. My father-in-law is second generation, and my wife is third. My father-in-law is supposed to come down for Thanksgiving. He's 81 years old because he's opened a new building in Ohio. He's 81 years old, and he's still building on. His kids are sitting why. I said, you see you guys running around? Yeah, well, how do we support the family? I got to grow this thing. Your margins per bed go down, so you need more beds.
Like, would you buy
So I got out of the way.
existing property?
No, but I got our balance sheet to 20 million.
We're actually doing.
And that before a house, I said, wait, these guys got something. So I took the 20 million with my partner, and we leveraged 130 million.
Yeah,
See, you guys, my hat's off to you. I'm Harvey.
That's so funny.
I don't think he knew that was, I'm not 41, they just, I'm Harvey Ross, I'm just a bad guy.
Started.
I had big dreams, I built my first ALF,
We're trying to.
and I thought I was gonna have 5 of them. But after running the first one,
I try, because we do multi-unit.
I just want to interrupt and say thank you very much. Yeah, I enjoyed your presentation.
Thank you.
I would also.
So quick, but.
No, it was good. Thank you.
We'll help you out if
Absolutely.
you need something. So if you guys need an engineer that, I love this concept, especially what he was talking about. And it's disabled, it's and low income, it's both, right? Because he was talking, I know, about like the
Yes,
workers
if you
are
don't
also
mind.
disabled, so is it kind of?
Did you give me your card now?
Yeah, generally, we don't like to.
hey, how you doing?
Right.
But Scott, I'm gonna call you.
But yeah, so
I'm gonna give you a call next week.
Do they do like teams as well?
I took a different highway than you. Now, one of them didn't have to